Now for 12 News Legal Deep Dive, where we take a look at some of the biggest legal cases making headlines in Arizona and across the country. Friday, Lori Vallow will appear before an Arizona judge where she'll be representing herself. The so-called doomsday mom who used to live in Arizona was already convicted of killing her kids in Idaho, but is now facing charges here. The I-Team's Erica Stapleton is here now to break down how we got to this point. Erica?
Yeah, well, Tram, I was in the courtroom last month when the judge allowed her to waive her right to an attorney. And one of the biggest questions was why she would want to do something like this, especially given her history of competency concerns in Idaho. Vallow was convicted in 2023 in Idaho for killing her children Tylee and JJ, who used to live here in the valley. She was sentenced to life in prison in Idaho, and her current husband, Chad Daybell, was sentenced to death in Idaho for the same case. At one point in time, she was deemed incompetent in that case, and it took several months to restore her to the point of going to trial. Back in Arizona, she's facing 2 conspiracy to commit murder charges, one out of Chandler in the death of her former husband, the other a shooting attempt in Gilbert at her niece's ex-husband, who ultimately was not injured. Each case will have its own trial, and one of her prior attorneys raised some flags about her competency here in Arizona, but her most recent attorney said that wasn't necessary, and she was ultimately deemed fit for trial. Before allowing her to represent herself, the judge asked her a series of questions to make sure she understood that she'd be held to the same standard as an attorney.
There are serious disadvantages and dangers to representing yourself. Can you just tell me a little bit why you want to represent yourself?
Yes, Your Honor. For the past 5 years that I've been incarcerated, I have taken it upon myself to study case law and criminal rules of procedure in the state of Idaho and Arizona, as well as federally. Prior to that, for the last 10 years, prior to my incarceration, I did study procedure in family law, and I have real trial experience.
All right, well, someone who does have a lot of trial experience, criminal defense attorney Hector Diaz of Diaz Law. Hector, what do you make of her reasons to represent herself?
You know, she laid a lot out in court. I think, there's been a lot made out of this, but I think what's at play is she feels as if what happened in Idaho, she wanted, I think what came out, she wanted to testify in Idaho. And she felt that her lawyers skewed that and, that it ultimately prevented her from testifying, right? She doesn't want that to happen again here. And I think she wants to make that decision. That is, this is a whole nother, it's a criminal case, a murder case, a lot of complications. This judge laid her through the dangers, the risks, the pitfalls. And I really question whether she completely understood and understands what that involves.
And Hector, Tram, I'll add that I covered the case in Idaho, and she, for years there, had the same attorneys that were helping her through the case, whereas here, she's kind of had a revolving door of public defenders. So that could maybe play into some of her reasoning there. And she said, I have trial experience. I'll point out that her experience is that criminal trial in Idaho where she was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, as well as some older family court cases that involved another ex-husband. So that's what she's referring to. So it'll be really interesting to see how this plays out.
When you're in court, you're constantly having to navigate the rules of evidence. You have to understand the rules and decorum of court.
Yeah.
As much as she's studied up in jail, again, kudos, but it's a whole nother, it's like taking a little league baseball player and throwing them into a major league game and saying, go at it.
Right, with very little time to learn.
Absolutely.
Right? We're talking years of experience, years of law school. And I think it's interesting that the judge was saying, I'm going to hold you to the standards of an attorney. He's not giving any slack just because, she doesn't really have the experience to represent herself.
Absolutely.
We've already seen some of this play out, too. She's filed a couple motions, and one of them was asking the Sheriff's Department, Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, who she's currently in their custody, to release some records as it pertains to her extradition from Idaho to here. And the judge denied that because he said it's too broad. So I think she's really getting her first taste of this, and it'll be, again, really interesting to see how it plays out.
And she's also, spending time on these kinds of motions that a judge might look at it and say, okay, this really isn't relevant to what's going on right now. Lawyers that are getting ready for trial are looking at interviewing witnesses. They are filing substantive motions to preclude certain evidence. And, I think it's, I had a chance to just kind of skim what she did file. And, if that's any indication of what's to expect, this is going to be a very rocky road for Lori Vallow.
Do you think we are getting a status conference tomorrow? I plan to be in the courtroom. And as of right now, jury selection is set to start at the end of March. Do you think that's going to go forward as planned?
I would be surprised. Yeah, I think if she is, my understanding, she has advisory council. Advisory council is probably telling her, you know, you need to continue this trial so that you can get ready and prepare.
Yeah. All right, Hector, thank you so much. We're going to have more from Hector coming up in a few minutes when we revisit the California wildfires and looting now becoming a big issue.